It was born out of a frustration. We knew that we could do the work. We were doing the work amazingly, but we had no brand, no personal brand, no company brand. And the guys beating us simply had a name for themselves.
Hi, Aaron. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Aaron, I think I've been starting every podcast asking our guests, how is the team at Louder.Online? And, with coronavirus and everything, it's been a wild time. Are you guys all good? And just a general check-in.
We're all good. We've been a fully distributed team since 13 years ago now, so it hasn't affected the way that we work, other than the flow-on effect of businesses that were sort of shutting down and that kind of thing. There's a flow-on effect in terms of clients changing budgets or pausing things, and at the same time we had a bunch of others come on board that were like, now's our time to market. So it was just a bit of a shake-up and upheaval, but nothing that threw us too badly.
Okay, that's great to hear. And I think that's a great place to start is, Louder.Online. You started it in 2008, I believe. And is that correct?
Yeah, 2008. Yeah.
So I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes along the way. But that initial decision to start remotely, could you talk about that? Because you guys were pretty ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, that was completely for selfish reasons. So we actually didn't start the agency with the idea that we were going to become an agency. So we started doing affiliate marketing, and we weren't doing consulting. We didn't have our own websites. We didn't do anything other than move traffic from one place to another, and liked it that way. But then we had friends who had businesses start to say to us, look, if you can do that, surely teach me, or I'll pay you to do it for my website. And so we started with small business and made our way up to the biggest companies in the world. But in doing that initially, we wanted, because when we're doing affiliate marketing, we could just keep traveling. We were on no one's time zone. It didn't really matter. There was no clients, so to speak. And we just wanted to continue that. So, and we wanted to enjoy the whole sort of arbitrage play of earning a strong currency and spending on a cheaper currency, but still highly skilled staff. So that was what we explored from the beginning, how to have teams offshore in different places, and it was a bit of a roller coaster to start with, but a steep learning curve that we are very thankful that we did from day one.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are getting to grips with this remote working thing, like I know my parents are, and friends who have businesses. This isn't something top of mind, but in digital marketing, we've been pretty accustomed to this. What are some of those challenges that you encountered with all those remote teams? And if someone were listening to this podcast were to be moving into this direction, what are some of those key bits of advice you would give them?
Look, initially we went straight to India. 12, 13 years ago. There's highly skilled, cheap labor in India. We went there and we've got a whole lot of, I can do that, I can do the task. And then it just come back a complete mess. And the first learning curve there was, that's as much my fault and our fault as it was theirs, because we weren't giving proper briefings, no sort of video walkthroughs, examples of what it was when it was done, check-ins of like every now and then as to make sure they're on the right page before over investing in things. So we went through a really big learning curve there. And then we were still of the opinion, we think it's a culture in India. Later we found out it's not. And we went to the Philippines. And so, we've had teams in the Philippines for ages as well. And we learned there were cultural issues there too, in terms of we'd have our staff there that would take the task, say they knew how to do it, and we believed them. They explained it back to us, all of that, and they'd disappear off the face of the earth, and you'd never hear from them again. And they wouldn't answer calls. They were gone on Skype, email, all sorts of things, and you just had no clue what was going on. So what we did there was we ended up having a couple of key staff, one in particular named Val, that was just brilliant. And we used to say, well, I don't get why that happens. And basically we put her in a managerial position there, and she ended up managing the teams, and they never just disappeared from her because they were the same culture, and she sort of bridged that gap for us. One of the things we then learned off the back of that was that we had to take into account cultural differences. We had to put team managers in place. We had to have a trusted individual or trusted individuals in management positions in different countries, which eventually led us to going back through Uplers and over to India for a lot of the work that we do there, which has turned out brilliant now because of what we learned and of having the right managerial team in place there. And I mean, now we've got teams in Eastern Europe, Asia, India, Australia, the US. We're everywhere.
Yeah, you guys certainly are. And in your core offices, I believe USA, Australia, Singapore?
Depends how you want to interpret that. There's no central office. Okay. We have 80% of our clients are US based, and then Australia is the next biggest, but they're pretty much on every continent as well. So I mean, there's no central anything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's something I wanted to touch upon with this podcast, and I thought was an interesting angle to pick your brains on, was something you've touched upon there was, cultural differences and ways of, ways of tailoring things for different countries. So, you've got a client in the US, you've got clients all over the world. Having teams remotely working on messaging for different regions of the world, that's quite a task because everywhere kind of speaks a little bit different or requires a little tweak here and there. How do you manage that from, not only the internal operation side of things, but also tailoring it for your clients?
Yeah, we do it by understanding what tasks we can and can't get done in different places, in different countries. There's different skill sets and that kind of thing. So we operate different to a lot of other agencies where, I know agencies that will have an account manager that looks after a bunch of accounts, and working with the account manager is a tech person or a dev or whatever, and they're on the same accounts, and those people basically handle the work back and forth on the delivery. We've done things really different in that our front of house people are our most expensive, highly skilled, qualified people that know the ins and outs of all of it. So what happens is there's only one person needs to attend those meetings and to translate things, to explain why things can and can't work, to consult, to do all of that, and then to organize the implementation of the work through our teams in different places. We tried originally getting content done in cheap places, and it was a nightmare and not something that I ever want to go back to because it's just not worth it. Like it's the fuel for every marketing channel needs to be brilliant. So we handle that in expensive places. We know that we can do data crunching and numbers and tech stuff in places that don't have to be able to communicate with the client, right? So yeah, we move things in the right areas. We structured our team differently, and that's made the difference.
So yeah, putting emphasis on the right areas where the skill set is. I think what's interesting is, within this model, you're tapping into experts all across the world, niche experts. But then internally, you've chosen to have an account manager who is like a sort of a central unit who can take technical tasks, can have that customer service angle. That's a really, really interesting approach there. I know you've touched on a little bit, but has that been a challenge, getting those people up to task and that sort of?
It's definitely been a challenge, but they, like you said, it's very different. A lot of the account managers that get dumped with dozens of accounts at different agencies, the cheapest staff that they have, they're junior account managers, and they're expected to front face all of this. And it never sat well with me. So we put expensive people in place. They're hard to find, but we hired entrepreneurs specifically. And I could tell you almost all of our, highest well-paid, highest skilled staff members are all doing their own side hustle at the same time. They're all taking their own clients here and there, doing their bit of work, building their own websites, all that kind of thing. And that made a huge difference to us because a lot of people would shy away from that and say, no, well, you're employed to work here. You work on this kind of thing only and give me your full attention. We were the opposite. I feel like we built loyalty with our team members by supporting and encouraging and training them to do those kind of things. They're working on their own little businesses on the side and realizing how hard it is to get a client and how much it hurts to lose a client. And it makes them a lot more loyal and makes them work harder for our clients. to make sure they earn them, they don't lose them, all of that kind of thing. So, that was a different approach as well, and one that we're really happy that we did.
So giving that extra bit of rope where, the Metallica, the thing I think of is Metallica, they didn't let the bassist go off and do his side band, so they kicked him out. It's like, but letting the team go out and do their things, exercise those different muscles and bits of creativity, that actually promotes more loyalty.
Yeah. And because it was never like they were doing it on our time. For me, it's always been, you got to look after these customers, the work that needs to be done, and you got to do it to an extremely high level. I don't care how many hours you're spending. I don't care what you want to do on the side of that, as long as we can reach you when we need it. You're on and around during proper business hours, or you're contactable. You can work on your own thing on weekends, after hours. If you need a half day here or there, that's fine. Sort that out, as long as we're getting what we need as a priority, and then we'll help you out. And we've helped out plenty.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and I think it's a very modern approach. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the expertise you're in, because I know you're sort of from a bit of an SEO background back in the day. This has changed so rapidly from probably, let's take it from 2008. It's evolved, it's changed massively. Where do you see SEO going, or what are the major sort of trends you're thinking about internally at Louder.Online?
I used to chase the trends and try, to guess the next best thing and what's coming and all of that. But what I found out after years and years of doing it is that it doesn't matter what changes, the core of it all remains the same. That you're providing value through content, you entertaining or educating, and your site's technically sound, so it's indexable. You're providing the right content, so people are linking to it, and you can get your own links. SEO is always going to be that. Yeah, they'll put an emphasis on page load times, which is in technical anyway, or they'll put an emphasis on dampening anchor text ratios and all this kind of stuff. Like, you just don't overthink it. Is this thing that we've always gone with. Make sure all the core things are in place, and a lot of that other stuff is just noise. Having said that, that's for client-based stuff. I'm got my own little websites here, and they're happy to push the boundaries, try new things, all of that. Those are our test beds and test areas, and we figure out what works here and there. But usually something that works really well is temporary anyway. So, we push the boundaries and take lessons from that and use them in the right way on different client sites.
So again, I mean, going back to the arrangement you have with the employees and yourself, having these side hustles and parallel projects going along to experiment with, is that folding back into your client work? Have you noticed when you brought those things in, did you notice that tipped the needle a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of group chats going back and forth with people saying, I just noticed this after the last algorithm on this site, and for these reasons, and people saying, all right, what's done different there? Why do you think it's working the way it is? And there's a lot of good group sharing in different ways. So I think that's been valuable as well.
Yep. So in terms of in the broader level content marketing as well, video, blogs, podcasts that we're doing right now, Twitch live streams everywhere. The nature of content is evolving and changing. What are your sort of top line insights or thoughts about this sort of acceleration we're getting going on here, and how is it affecting, your clients or your thought process on this digital landscape?
There's always room for more content and the right content, and especially on the right channels. So the answer to that is it depends. It depends on the channel, depends on what you're doing already, the level of competition, what everyone else is doing. If you look at it broadly, any network, any platform, LinkedIn, for example, that is low on content in certain ways or certain types of content, is going to provide a huge amount of organic reach for a period of time until the amount of content fills up and that balance comes back, and then they switch into, well, you want more awareness, go into paid. That I see that happening, but that depends on, again, competition, amount of content, all of that. And the reality is that most of the sites that we deal with, the vast majority of sites that we come across, they write about their product, their service, and they think they're doing content marketing. They do no distribution. It's still that way. It doesn't matter. We get, some of the biggest companies in the world are still doing the exact same thing. So even just getting them onto the right path of, hey, let's create content about the industry, let's educate or entertain, not write about your product and why everyone should be using it because it's the best thing in the world. So doing that sort of shift, there's still not enough people doing that, and doing that shift for clients is impactful for them as well. So there's a lot of runway in a lot of different ways. I don't think there's going to be too much content anyway.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting thought. So the blue chip, the big guys are still doing the really mundane, boring content marketing. But even though content marketing has been around for years and years and years, we still keep, you still are coming into those kind of clients. What are your how do you approach that? Obviously it depends and it industry to industry, but what are your sort of initial takeaways in that kind of scenario, or initial recommendations, I should say?
It depends on what they've come to us for. So I'll give you an example of a particularly challenging industry, and that's when any business comes to us and they've grown through off the back of performance marketing, and they're doing a lot of ads and making a lot of money, but they're like, okay, well, the minute we stop that, the business is dead. We need some organic traffic. We want to do some content marketing. We want our brand to grow, all of that kind of thing. They come to us with the right reasons, and it's a hard slog because they're used to putting $1 in, getting 3 out. And this is all organic stuff, and having to convince them of capital value increase, brand increase, long-term growth, free organic traffic moving forward. Whereas they want to measure everything really fiercely when there's nothing to measure typically in the beginning. That's challenging. That's one that we face often. On the other side of things, like even the bigger businesses who are just used to writing about their product all the time, again, because of the way our business has marketed itself over the years, people come to us typically through inbound. They're already looking for what we have. They're already pre-sold and pre-educated. So it's not like having to convince them to go down SEO and content marketing route. They ask for that specific thing. So that makes it a bit different. So I guess channel of acquisition for us impacts things as well.
There's a few interesting threads coming off that, but I think the first thing to bring to the table is changing the way of thinking for your clients, in that scenario where they're data crunchers, what's the CPA, hey, this is organic stuff. What are those conversations, and how do you sort of perform or change their way of thinking?
And only some do get changed. Others just say, well, show me some forecast documents. And that's exhausting in itself. Like, we have built out some really detailed forecast documents that will, let's say one client wants to do 100 blog posts a month, or we're pitching them 100 blog posts a month, answering 100 different questions, big amount of content, each piece of content targeting a group of keywords. Let's just assign one keyword to that particular blog post. We're then looking at potential search volume, current rankings, seasonality, expected increase in rankings, traffic, click-through rates on the front page of Google once it hits there, when they're likely to hit there, like really complicated stuff and big spreadsheets and everything else. But there's just so many like what ifs that go into that.
Intangibles, yeah.
And the reality is that we often get people say, well, that's great. Like you're saying that we're going to rank for 100 different things over here, but we want to rank for this one head term that matters to the business. It's like, well, there's another education piece, mate. I get it. That's a vanity keyword. You think that's going to drive the business, but it doesn't. 80% of your traffic is going to come through long tail like it does for every other website. We've got to meet those long tail requirements. And sometimes you're banging your head against the wall, and it can be really frustrating. Uh, and then they'll say, well, no, just spend all your time ranking us for those keywords. You're like, okay, well, with your budget, that's going to take 8 months to rank for one keyword, and you're going to see no return on investment all the way there. Is that what you're happy with? And then they sit there and say, oh, I'm not happy with that. I want to go down another channel. It can be exhausting. My preferred path, the most successful one that I've seen, is you don't measure anything for the first 3 months other than all the lead indicators. Like, are we delivering the content volumes we said we would on time? And is the engagement working and all of that? Is it being published? Are these things being fixed? Okay, cool. Are you seeing index posts? Are you seeing now they're moving up in the rankings even though they're not getting traffic? Then traffic. And so basically we set like a 3-month benchmark to say, all right, now we'll put some metrics in place now that we know what happens when we create X amount of content. And now that we actually have conversions and leads and everything else that we can say, all right, we'll just, if that's how much you're getting with this traffic, we'll 10x the traffic, we can get 10x the conversions. It's really hard to do with no data and just guesswork, and that's often an uphill battle.
So that first 3 months is definitely about sort of more of a project management, like getting the housekeeping in order, getting the benchmarks in check. And then from there, you're proceeding into more of the optimization, like heavy optimization, publishing content, long tail keywords.
The reality is that even within a 3-month engagement, a client that is going to be doing 100 posts a month, that's month one, you've got to be doing all the technical stuff anyway, right? All the infrastructure, setting things up, page load times and speed and conversion stuff, content strategy, idea generation, technical analysis, Google Analytics setup and config. Like there's loads that goes into that first month. Second month, you can start producing that content, but it's going to take weeks to be producing 100 pieces of content. So stuff's not going to even get published to almost the end of the second month. And then when it is published, it's got to get indexed, but it's not going to do anything until you get links to it. And it's going to take you a month to get the volume of links you need to 100 posts. So it's not till end of month 3 that you actually got links to content live, and a technical infrastructure that's indexable that Google likes. So trying to convince people that of how long that takes and that you're not going to see anything that you can benchmark until then is often a struggle. But that's the reality of that kind of work and that kind of volume of work.
Yeah, it seems like very, very practical advice. So let's move into some, we've talked a lot about some really great stuff with working with clients and also internal team structure. You've been published in, where's my list here? HubSpot, Search Engine Journal, Entrepreneur Magazine, Social Media Today. There's 2 questions I want to ask around this. But the first one is, how do you approach building a great piece of content? And let's just call it in the digital marketing space. Let's not, we could talk about every industry has a million different ways you can approach it. But working with these kind of publications, what's your general thought process, or do they come to you with a topic? How does that whole negotiation take place?
That can be really broad, because there was how it was initially and then what it's sort of grown into over time. Initially, it was that I'd build relationships with the editors, journalists, and publishers, and they'd agree to allow me to publish content on the site. I'd pitch it based on the kind of content that I could see was getting traffic, engagement, socially, all that kind of stuff that was of interest to their audience. And I'd pitch that idea and then build out the content according to updated information, what I think was going to work really well for that audience. Over 12 years or something of doing it, it's gone from, some I still contribute to or I pitch to. A lot of times people are asking me to contribute, or the content that you'll see is like an interview like this posted somewhere, or whatever it is. It's this big web that grows over time of a mix of interviews, guest contributions, columns, features, all sorts of different things. So it's kind of hard to answer that one as of now.
Yeah, makes sense. But let's say somebody who maybe has established a bit of a career, wants to get into this kind of thing and get that sort of thought leadership, personal brand going. What are some of the key pieces of advice that you would give in terms of like this blog? Let's concentrate on this sort of blog content aspect of it.
Yeah, so stop thinking that you'll be able to go out and publish for Forbes and Entrepreneur straight off the bat, because it takes a while to get there. I mean, it's worth it when you do, but it'll take time to get there. You got to do stick with the whole idea of trading up the chain, right? Like, start at the publications that you do have access to, that you can realistically publish to, get some good posts live on those, use those as credibility to be able to keep going for bigger and bigger publications. That's what I'd recommend. And even those first ones, you've got to have content somewhere, i.e. your own website, that you can leverage to say, hey, look, I've created some good stuff over here. I'd love to contribute to your post, your publication. The trading up the chain thing works. Remember to do it consistently over a long period, and it adds up. Like, it sounds like I'm bragging, but like, evidence of it working is, like, you can search my name in the first 20 pages of Google. Every single result is something that we've done over the last bunch of years, and it's like compound interest, right? It's a snowball effect that keeps going and going, and that forms that web of credibility, so that when we're pitching a client or someone's reaching out to us, we don't have to prove who we are or why we're competitive for $1 million contract. They found us through stuff that we've created over the years, and that does the pre-selling for us, and that's a real leg up.
So the personal brand and whatnot has definitely helped, reduce sales cycles, reduce time on energy spent in sales. Like, as you said, they come in pre-qualified, they come in pre-educated. Has this always been kind of a overall strategy you've had, or has it just kind of fallen into place?
It was always the overall strategy, and it was born out of a frustration of we were pitching for $60,000 contracts, for example, and we knew that we could do the work. We were doing the work amazingly, but we had no brand, no personal brand, no company brand, and the guys beating us simply had a name for themselves. But we knew we could do the work better, and that annoyed me. And it just came down to, okay, you got to start somewhere. And so we just started investing in the brand, started publishing content, and speaking on stage and writing books and all sorts of different things. And that's where it legitimately was like 90% of the reason, the difference between losing $60,000 contracts and winning $1 million contracts was people seeing our brand and coming in pre-sold, and not having to prove yourself or educate people prior to the conversation about the work.
So what are some of the key areas of focus for your personal brand? You mentioned your book, which I'd like to talk about. We've got obviously the content marketing and blog content you've been publishing. Can you talk about a little bit about the ecosystem of content you put out, or how you approach personal branding in 2020 for yourself?
Yeah, it's largely still the same thing. I haven't really changed what we're doing. That's a lie. So we're still creating content in the same ways. I mean, we've added some podcasts, which is great. Some interviews like this that we're doing as the interviewer as well as the interviewee.
Which one's harder?
I don't know. I don't mind either of them. I like them both.
Okay.
Trying to think of questions on off the cuff is tricky sometimes, but I don't mind interviewing someone where they're just like flat and giving no responses, and
it's tough.
You're just burning through your questions in 6.5 minutes. That's exhausting.
Yeah.
But
thank goodness you haven't done that to me today.
So creating a whole lot more content. Now, one of the things that we're doing different to what we've always done was that I've always loved the idea of a paid lead funnel for our agency clients. You turn the tap on, you know how much it costs for a lead, how much it costs to close a client, and so on. The reality is that the clients that we target, the funded startups through to enterprise, they don't see an ad on Facebook and then sign up for $1 million contract. It's just not how it works, right? They need to have seen you in numerous places, got multiple touch points on you and your brand, feel like they found you, read you in Forbes, saw a feature in Fortune magazine, all that kind of stuff. And then come through and make the inquiry. And so I always wanted to find that, never found it, but I sat there 18 months ago thinking, well, why don't we just get more leverage, more mileage out of the stuff that we're doing? And that wasn't to necessarily say create more content. It was that I was breaking the golden rule of content marketing. We were creating content, we weren't doing much to distribute it in any way, shape, or form. So we've since changed that up, and we've got a whole process that happens and content going out everywhere. So the good thing is that we've got 1,500 pieces of content created over a decade that we're able to reuse, repurpose, redistribute, send around socially. We're able to spend a lot of the time on the distribution now, and seeing the results that comes from that, which again is hard to measure because it's largely on the awareness stage of people seeing us and getting one of those touch points. Is not necessarily they're going to convert off that piece of content. So, but yeah, it's working for the purposes that we had in mind.
Are you guys sort of, because what we're doing with this podcast is, we've got the main podcast and we're breaking it up into, little YouTube clips, Joe Rogan style, and then little 45-second for LinkedIn and Facebook. Is that repurposing or that recontextualization for the native platforms? Is that something you're seeing as like what you guys are doing and a major trend and an emphasis that you're putting towards your clients?
Not towards our clients, but just for ourselves. That's what we're doing. We're also going the other way. So we've got a lot of written content and those guest posts. So we're recording those in audio and putting them on our podcast, and repurposing podcast episodes. So a video like this, we're then stripping the audio out, putting it on a podcast. We're transcribing it, using it as a blog post. We're doing stills, images, short videos, all kinds of different things, and it goes in numerous places with a lot of systems and processes behind that whole thing, which is really good. Like I said, we're sticking to the same amount of content that we're creating, we've got a lot of backlog for years, so there's a lot of stuff that we can do with it, which is really good.
Yeah, and it's fantastic to hear the repurposing. I'm really into that. Could you touch upon a little bit about that process with the distribution without giving away your golden secrets?
No, golden secrets. It's a combination of, so I have one full-time team member that manages it all, but in terms of managing it, they're doing the work of many, many people if it was all done manually. There's a combination of like web services that we use to help with some of this. There's automation tools like Zapier that aren't distributing the content. They're moving content and from one place to another for us to action and edit and use, not just here's a social share that goes there for this piece and so on, because I don't enjoy that. That's not cool. What else? There's full-time staff, services, automation, syndication, and then scheduling tools off the bottom of that make sure they go to the right places and right accounts at the right time.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Love it. So let's talk about your book that you mentioned before, Faster, Smarter, Louder, which you wrote with Gian Clancy, if that's correct.
It is.
Could you talk a little bit about what made you came up with this idea? Another digital marketing book. What's going to make this one different, and the overall approach and the process of putting together a book. Because am I right in saying this is the first book you've been involved with?
It is, and I think the answer to that is to start at the beginning, which is what is the purpose of the book, and understanding the purpose, you then can answer that clearly, which is, it was never to sell 1 million books or anything like that. It was never to get a financial ROI for the time invested directly through book sales. It was just one more thing in terms of a credibility indicator and implied credibility and authority through having that. It was something I always wanted to do as well. Growing up, to be a published author, in fact, a best-selling author, because our launch went really well and we achieved that goal. Sorry, I got someone calling me the cardinal sin. I should have turned all my my things off. So yeah, we achieved that goal pretty quickly, and so we're really happy with that. But it just added to everything else that we were doing, so that you get on stage, you're introduced as a best-selling author, and there's all of that. Interestingly, it was a really hard process for me, because I got so sick of reading the book again and again and again. The amount of times you have to read it for editing and changes is absolutely exhausting, especially if there's two of you that wrote it, because then you both have to read it and wait for the other one. It's a tiring process, but in the end, you just publish it. I just want it live. Let's have a book. What's really cool though was that the amount of people that have reached out to us from places around the world where I was just not expecting it. Right, we had someone from Barbados reach out and want to connect and talk about how the book's changing their lives, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. To have that kind of impact. I spoke with someone recently that I was looking at using their service, and they said, what a small world. I literally just finished your book yesterday. And
wow.
That's insane. So those are the people that are reaching out. Imagine all those that aren't saying anything. Like, it's a cool feeling to have that I was not expecting.
Yeah, most certainly, and 1,000 congratulations. But I think you're maybe dumbing it down a little bit, because it sounds like, hey, I do a book, I publish a book and things go well. You've got to have value, and those people are getting value out of that book. You've put a lot of time and effort and thought into it. Can you talk about managing the chicken or the egg? I imagine, like, who's writing who, sections. Like, was that tough, managing, having two authors on it? Okay, cool.
You're right. I'm dumbing it down. A lot of time, energy, and effort went into it. But what happens as well is that you realize that you could write a book on so many things. When you sit down to write it, a book on digital marketing is so broad. Like, I could have written a book that thick on just SEO or just technical SEO or brand. So you're often worried that you didn't go deep enough in any of those areas. And this is just my first book. I'll do it in the next book. Next one will just be about that one topic, right? So in the end, that's a fear. I hope that people got enough value out of it. And it turns out that they did. Right? You forget that to be an expert in anything, you only need to know more than the people that you're talking to. So at that particular time, to be perceived as an expert. So the reality is that people just starting out that would have been thinking, wow, like that's exactly what I needed right now. Right. And so that was really cool. In terms of being able to speak to who was writing what particular part, that wasn't a challenge for us, because we've got different skill sets, and we broke the book up into the practical and tactical, how to do this part and how to do that part and what that looks like and all sorts of stuff. But another big, really important piece was the human psychology aspect and the behavioral psychology, and people forgetting that people sitting behind a computer are real people. You're not just doing marketing to machines. And so that was the tie-in that Gian sort of focused on in everything that she was doing. And I think the combination of those really played well together to make a good book and an interesting read that people could relate to.
Yeah, well, that's you're looking at all these click-through rates and numbers and whatnot, and it's just another impression. But yeah, that's a real person behind there. Yeah. I think it's something that digital marketers and books don't really talk about that much.
Yeah, it's often forgotten about, but like I said, they probably have the same challenge that I did. How much can you put into a book? I found that by the end of the book, I had so much more to write in so many different ways, and not sure if I have the energy to do it at the moment.
Yeah, so has it spurred on a passion to do something else, or is it sort of just rummaging around in the back of the mind right now?
It just made me feel unfinished. It made it feel the book was enough, but it was enough for the people starting out and not deep enough into certain areas that I'd like to have gone deeper in. So it's like when you're sitting there going, I just had a whole lot more to add. It's a difference between speaking at a conference, and you're speaking to people who are just getting into marketing or just getting into online, and you're asking and answering fairly basic questions, versus like a really challenging room about the technical ideas and that kind of thing. You go out of one thinking, oh, that was cool, I'm glad I got it done, and I had a lot more to give. That's how I feel.
Yeah, completely. So If someone, I think the sentiment here is like the expertise aspect. Let's say somebody does have expertise in something. This is going a little bit off topic from digital marketing, but that's okay. They want to start a book, or this, it's part of the personal branding strategy. It makes complete sense. What would you say is the best way to start thinking about a book, planning it, or maybe even for the next one, what did you learn from the first time through that you're going to, maybe that's a better way to phrase it. What would you implement in the next time?
I'd actually say make sure you don't start with a book. Like, it's just not, it's not going to help you as, if you look at what we do, the company brand and my personal brand, you can see a lot of stuff in a lot of places and a book. If you just could see a book and nothing else, it doesn't give as much value. It doesn't help you in as many ways as you assume it's going to. So make sure you've built another foundation of stuff underneath it before you get to it. That way, you know how to write. It's a lot of writing in a lot of different places that we've done over the years. So you learn to write, you learn to speak to the audience in the right way, you learn what they're interested in and how to put it together right. And then when you're ready for a book, use a company like Scribe that can help you put the book together. If you're worried about it the first time through, and there's a lot of hand holding that can happen with those guys, it makes it quite easy for you in theory. Can take a lot of time, but it can still make it easier than if you're doing it on your own.
Yeah, I mean that makes complete sense. The book is just a cherry on top in the sort of the ecosystem of content. Aaron, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure picking your brains. Is there anything you'd like the audience to know? Maybe a way they can pick up your book, or anything that's coming up for Louder.Online in the future?
Yeah, look, happy to connect with anyone. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn or at Louder.Online. Search for my name. If I'm doing my job, you should be able to find me. Yeah, happy to connect. But if you want to check out the book, it's all over Amazon. So feel free to search for that. Yeah. And
that's Faster, Smarter, Louder. Go check it out, guys. I'm certainly going to be having a read. Aaron, it's been fantastic. All the best, and we'll speak soon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or your favorite podcasting platform. Don't forget to head to our website to download the show notes, a document summarizing the major insights from the podcast. Thanks for listening to this episode, and I hope to see you next time on Digital Mountaineers.